There is a mill in a wooded valley in Cheshire where the River Bollin runs so close beneath the windows that the workers on the lowest floor could feel it through the boards, and where, on a winter morning, the mist comes off the water and climbs the warm brick to the roofline before the sun has found the valley at all. You reach it by walking downhill, which is the first strange thing, because you approach almost every great building in Britain by looking up. Quarry Bank sits at the bottom of its landscape, 10 miles south of Manchester, folded into 400 acres of oak and beech so completely that you do not see it until you are almost upon it. 5 stories of Georgian brick, a bell cupola on the roof, because the building needed to summon people, and it needed to summon them before dawn. Round-headed windows arranged with the calm regularity of a country house, and behind the far wall, in a chamber cut down into the rock, an iron water wheel weighing 50 tons, still turning, the most powerful working water wheel in Europe. What you are looking at is the most complete cotton mill of the Georgian age, the best preserved factory of the revolution that built the modern world. It is beautiful. Visitors say so all day long, on the bridge, in the gardens, in the tea room. And the beauty is the trap, because for more than half a century, the elegant building in the trees ran on the labour of children who had been signed over to it with a cross, because most of them could not write their own names. Not a palace, not a castle, not the seat of an ancient family. Quarry Bank is where around 1,000 workhouse children were indentured between 1790 and 1847, fed, schooled, worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and paid nothing at all. It is where a Liverpool girl who ran away had her hair cut off and was locked alone in a room with the window boarded over. It is where 2 boys who fled to London gave sworn evidence before a magistrate that survives to this day, down to the Sunday dinner and the lost finger. And it is where the fortune that paid for the schoolroom and the chapel grew in part from a sugar plantation worked by enslaved people an ocean away. This is the dark story of Britain's most complete factory, Quarry Bank Mill. If you find these deep investigations into Britain's great houses and the hidden lives within them worth your time, please subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me which estate we should explore next, and help these stories reach the audience they deserve. It begins with a merchant and a river. Samuel Gregg was born in Belfast on 26th of March 1758, one of 13 children of Thomas Gregg, a ship owner and merchant whose interests ran from linen to insurance to property in the Caribbean. 13 children was too many for one business. So Samuel, aged about 8, was put on a boat and sent to Manchester to be raised by his uncles, Robert and Nathaniel Hyde, textile merchants with no heir of their own. He was not sent for love. He was sent as stock, transferred from one branch of the family concern to another, the way a bale of linen might be consigned from Belfast to a warehouse on the Arwell. It worked. The boy learned the cloth trade from the counting house floor upwards, and the uncles came to trust him with everything they had. In 1782, Robert Hyde died. Samuel Gregg, aged 24, inherited the firm and a fortune of around £10,000, well over £1 million in today's money, along with warehouses, credit, and a name that opened doors across the Manchester Exchange. Most young men who come into money at 24 spend it on horses. Gregg spent it on falling water. The timing mattered more than the money. Richard Arkwright's water frame had turned cotton spinning from a cottage craft into an industrial process, a machine that never tired, never argued, and never stopped as long as something turned it. In 1785, the courts broke Arkwright's grip on his patents, and the design was suddenly anybody's. Any man with capital and a fast river could build a spinning mill and print money with it. Across Lancashire, Derbyshire, and Cheshire, the race began. A scramble, not for land or title, but for gradient, for the simple physical fact of water dropping from one level to another. The model already existed, and so did its workforce. At Cromford in Derbyshire, Arkwright had built not just a mill, but a system. Machines by the river, cottages for the families, and children at the frames, because the water frame had been designed so that a child could mind it. Where local children ran short, the mill owners of the 1780s had found an inexhaustible supply in the parish workhouses of the cities, institutions crowded with orphans and foundlings that the law allowed to be apprenticed out. None of this was hidden. It was praised. Magistrates, clergymen and economists wrote approvingly of a scheme that emptied the poorhouses, taught idle children a trade, and turned a burden on the rates into productive labour. When Samuel Gregg planned his mill, child apprentices were not a dark secret of the trade. They were the trade's proudest innovation. In 1783, Samuel Gregg went looking for his river, and he found it barely a morning's ride from his warehouse. The Bollen, at Styal, ran through a narrow, steep-sided valley of oak and rock, dropping fast enough to turn a wheel in every month of the year. The land belonged to the Earl of Stamford's estate, and Gregg lost what he needed. In 1784, the mill went up, 4 stories of brick at first, plain and handsome, built for around £3,000, with a weir on the river and a wheel in its chamber. He named it for the old Quarry Bank it stood on. The water cost him nothing. It would never ask for a wage, never fall sick, never run away in the night. It was the perfect worker, and it set the standard by which every other worker at Styal would be measured. But the perfect river ran through an almost empty valley. That was the flaw in the whole calculation. A spinning mill needed hands, dozens of them, and the hands the machines wanted most were small ones, quick enough to piece broken threads over moving frames and slight enough to crawl beneath them. Wilmslow was a scatter of farms. Manchester's workers would not walk 10 miles to a wood. Gregg solved half the problem by building cottages and recruiting families. The other half he solved with a signature, and it is the other half that this story is about. On 3rd November 1789, Samuel Gregg married Hannah Lightbody, the daughter of a Liverpool merchant, a clever, serious, formidably educated woman of 23. She brought a dowry of £10,000 and a conscience that had been trained in the dissenting chapels of Liverpool. Hannah was a Unitarian. Her circle at home had included William Roscoe, the poet and campaigner against the slave trade, and she had grown up believing that wealth was a stewardship for which its holder would answer. She married into cotton, and cotton, at both ends of its long supply chain, was not a trade an abolitionist could inspect too closely. In 1790, on the rise above the mill, her husband built a long, plain, comfortable-looking house with a garden for vegetables and a well of its own. It was called the Apprentice House. It was built to hold up to 90 children. The valley had its workforce. On 24th September 1795, Hannah gave birth at Manchester to a son, Robert Hyde Gregg, named for the dead uncle whose fortune had built the mill. In the same year, Samuel engaged a young physician from Knutsford, Dr. Peter Holland, to attend the workforce, making Quarry Bank one of the first factories in England with its own doctor. The dynasty and its paperwork arrived together. Both would outlast everyone in this story, and the paperwork would outlast the dynasty. The next 40 years were an ascent almost without a stumble. The mill was enlarged before the century turned, then enlarged again. A greater wheel went into the rock chamber, an iron giant designed on the suspension principle by the engineer Thomas Hughes, drinking the whole river through a deepened head race. In 1797, Gregg built himself Quarry Bank House 100 yards from his own factory wall, so that the family took breakfast to the sound of their machinery, the low, constant roar of water and gearing that visitors said you stopped hearing after a day and never stopped hearing after a lifetime. By the early 1830s, Samuel Gregg and Sons ran 5 mills at Styal, Caton, Lancaster, Bury and Bollington, employing more than 2,000 people, and the firm stood among the largest cotton enterprises in Britain. The boy, consigned from Belfast, had become one of the masters of the age. Around the mill, he built a world. Styal village grew cottage by cottage in the same warm brick, each with a garden, an allotment and a privy, luxuries that Manchester's cellar dwellers could not have imagined. There was a shop where prices were fair and purchases were docked from wages. There was a school. There was Norcliffe Chapel, opened in 1823, where the family worshipped alongside their workers. There was no public house, and that was not an oversight. Gregg owned the houses, the shop the school, the chapel, and the waking hours of everyone who used them. Kindness and control came out of the same ledger, written in the same hand, and by the standards of the age, it must be said, the bargain was a good one. A family in Styal had a dry house, a garden, credit at a fair shop, a doctor who came when sent for, and steady work that did not vanish with the harvest. Rents of a shilling or two a week were stopped quietly from wages, and so was the shop account, so that a worker could pass a whole year without touching coin, fed, housed and clothed inside a closed loop of the Greg's own bookkeeping. Families put their own children into the mill as piecers and doffers as soon as the law and their need allowed, and thought themselves lucky to have the places. Visitors were brought to Styal to see what enlightened manufacture looked like, and they went away persuaded. Nearly everything they were shown was true. It was what they were not shown that this channel exists for. Hannah made the children her province. She taught the apprentices scripture on Sundays, walked them to chapel in crocodile lines, compiled little books of maxims for their improvement, and pressed her husband for better schooling than the law would require for another generation. Her letters, preserved in the Manchester collections, show a woman entirely sincere. She wrote of her hope that the mill children might be made useful, orderly and happy, and she believed every word. Dinner guests at Quarry Bank House included ministers, reformers, and philosophers of the Unitarian network, men who argued for liberty over the port, while the smell of oil and cotton dust drifted up from the mill below. From the drawing room, Styal looked like the future with a clean conscience. The second generation was raised to inherit all of it, the mills and the manor alike. Robert Hyde Gregg was given the education of a gentleman rather than a tradesman, university, European travel, a taste for Greek antiquities that he indulged for the rest of his life, and then a partnership in the firm while still a young man. His brothers took mills of their own. The family had crossed, in a single generation, the invisible line between men who made money and men who explained it. And Robert would spend his career doing both at once, running spindles by the thousand and publishing his opinions on how the poor should be governed. The transition looked seamless. It usually does from inside. But the ledgers upstairs told a longer story, because tucked inside the family's papers, alongside the cotton accounts, sat another property altogether. It was called Hillsborough. It was a sugar estate on the island of Dominica, 4,000 miles from the Bollin, and the people who worked it appeared in its inventories not as employees, but as possessions, listed with ages and values, the way the mill listed spindles. It had come down through Thomas Gregg's Caribbean ventures, and Samuel held it for the whole of his adult life. Hillsborough sat in the background of everything at Styal, the way the river sat behind the mill, quietly, constantly, turning. The height, then, was real. The 5 mills, the model village, the chapel, the schoolroom, the doctor, all of it was real, and none of it was free. The Greggs stood at the top of a system whose costs had been carefully arranged to fall on people who could not refuse them. Some of those people were in the Caribbean. Around 90 of them, at any given moment, were asleep in the long plain house on the rise above the wheel. The first children came down the lane in carts in the autumn of 1790, sent from the parish workhouse at Newcastle under Lyme, and after them from Liverpool, and from parishes as far away as London. The system that received them was called pauper apprenticeship, and on paper it was a kindness. A child on a parish's books was a cost. An overseer could sign that child over to a mill owner, who undertook to feed, house, clothe, and school it until adulthood, and the parish's problem became the mill's asset. No wages changed hands, because the child's labour was the payment. The indenture was a legal document, binding for up to a decade. Most of the children signed it with a cross. Around 1,000 of them passed through the apprentice house between 1790 and 1847. They were roughly 9 to 18 years old, and as the decades went on, they were mostly girls. Their day began with the bell before 6 and ended 12 hours later, 6 days a week. The smallest worked as scavengers, crawling under the moving frames to sweep up waste cotton while the machinery ran above their spines. The quicker ones worked as piecers, leaning over the frames hour after hour to twist broken threads together with fingers that had to be faster than the machine. In the evenings, there were lessons, reading for the boys, reading and sewing for the girls. On Sundays, there was chapel, the schoolroom, the vegetable garden, and Hannah Gregg's scripture class. They slept too, to a bed in long dormitories under the eaves. 12 hours in a spinning room is a specific experience, and it is worth pausing on. The air was kept warm and damp because the thread liked it that way, and the thread's preferences outranked everybody's. Cotton fly hung in that air like slow snow, settling in hair and lungs. The frames were never silent and never still. Hundreds of spindles turning at once, a noise that workers learn to talk through by reading lips. A piecer walked miles in a day without leaving her alley, back and forth along the frame, leaning in over moving parts hundreds of times between bell and bell. The machinery did not have guards. It had appetites. Dr. Holland's casebook and the mill's own records preserve what it took: fingers, hair, and, on the worst days, more. And the frames were running again the same afternoon, because the river did not stop and the orders did not wait. The house was run by superintendents, and the names that survive from the later years are George and Elizabeth Timperley. The mill's memoranda books record the discipline they administered, and the record is precise in the way only a well-run business is precise. Forfeited free time, meals of bread and water, overtime worked against the cost of a broken bobbin, and for girls who absconded, a punishment aimed not at the body but at the self, the cutting off of their hair. Running was not rare. That is what the memoranda make quietly clear. Children slipped away for a night, for a fair, for a parent half remembered in another county, and most were brought back or came back on their own, because a child with no money and a workhouse behind them had nowhere else in the world to be. In June 1806, 2 of those children decided the arithmetic was not worth it, slipped out of Styal, and set off for London. Thomas Priestley was 13 years old. Joseph Sefton was 17. They were not running away from home so much as running back to it. Both had been sent north by London parishes, and somewhere at the end of 200 miles of turnpike were mothers they had not seen in years. They begged rides, walked, and astonishingly, they made it. London swallowed them for a few weeks. Then the parish caught up with them, and on the 14th of August 1806, at a public office before a Middlesex magistrate, each boy was examined on oath about his life at Quarry Bank. Their depositions were taken down word by word, and they survive. 2 of the best first-person records of child factory labour in England. Priestley's testimony explains why he ran. Some months earlier, his hand had been caught while he tended his machine. "My finger was taken off by the wheels," he told the magistrate, and he was sent to the infirmary at Manchester to be treated. When he was asked why he had absconded from so respectable an establishment, his answer had nothing to do with hours or porridge. He said, in words the clerk preserved, that he wished to see his mother. He was 13. He was 200 miles from her, and a machine had just eaten part of his hand. The magistrate wrote it all down. Sefton's deposition is the daily routine itself, sworn and dated. He described the bell, the hours from 6 in the morning until 7 at night, the half hour for breakfast and the hour for dinner, the schooling in the evenings, and the food, in the exact words that historians have quoted ever since. "On Sunday, we had for dinner boiled pork and potatoes," he stated. "We also have peas, beans, turnips, and cabbages in their season. It is not a howl of protest, and that is precisely why it convinces." The boys described decent food, a garden, a schoolroom, and a system that had still taken a finger from one of them, and every waking hour from both. The magistrate returned them to their indentures. Priestley went back into the record books at Styal. Then both boys walk out of history. Samuel Gregg died on the 4th of June 1834 at Quarry Bank House, within sound of his own wheel, having outlived Hannah by 6 years. The mills passed to his sons, and Styal to the ablest of them, Robert Hyde Gregg, the child born in 1795, now a precise, clever, unsentimental man of the second generation, a collector of art and antiquities, a writer of pamphlets, and a believer that his family system was not merely profitable, but correct. 2 years into his rule, the system met a 16-year-old from Liverpool. Understand what age meant inside that system because it is the key to everything Esther Price did. An indenture ran to a fixed birthday. Until that birthday, a girl's labour belonged to the mill for nothing. From the day after it, the same girl at the same frame drew a wage. A child's age was not a fact about her, it was a sum of money, and the only version of it that counted was the one written on the mill's copy of the paperwork. A workhouse girl had no parents to contradict the document, no family Bible with her birth in the flyleaf, and no standing to argue. If the mill's paper said she had 2 more unpaid years, she had 2 more unpaid years, unless she could get her hands on the parish register that recorded her baptism. And the register was in Liverpool. Esther Price had come to the apprentice house from the Liverpool workhouse, and by the summer of 1836 she had reason to believe the mill's paperwork was wrong about her, that she was older than her indenture said, and that the document holding her at Styal held her on a false birthday. There was one place the truth could be checked: the parish records at home. On the morning of Monday, August 1836, the count at the apprentice house came up 2 girls short. Esther Price and Lucy Garner had gone through the fields before the bell, heading for Liverpool. Lucy lost her nerve first and was back within days. She was punished according to the tariff. Esther stayed out longer, and when she had done what she went to do, she did something stranger than running. She walked back to Styal of her own accord and presented herself at the gates. The punishment that followed was decided at the top with Robert Hyde Gregg's knowledge and carried out by the Timperleys, and we know its details because the superintendent wrote them down in the mill's own memoranda, in his own hand, where they can still be read. Her hair was cut off. She was confined alone in a room of the apprentice house on bread and water, and the window of the room was boarded over so that she would sit in darkness until she submitted. The sentence was to run for days, and it did. Partway through it, Elizabeth Timperley died in the house. The corpse was laid out under the same roof, and Esther Price, locked alone in the boarded room, knew it was there. The record says she tore at the boards in the dark. She was a week in that room before the door was opened. The year after Esther's punishment, Robert Hyde Gregg published a pamphlet. It appeared in 1837 under the title The Factory Question, and it was an argument against the 10 hours movement, the campaign to limit the working day of the young. Gregg wrote as a man of facts and figures, warning that the measure would bring ruin on the trade that fed the nation, that the mills of England could not carry it. He composed it as the master of an establishment where children bound to him by indenture were working the very hours he was defending, within earshot of the room where the boards had come down off a window. His mother had taught those children scripture. Her letters hoped to make them useful, orderly, and happy. Her son's pamphlet priced their hours, but Esther Price did not leave. That is the part nobody expects. When her indenture ended, she was free, and she stayed, married a mill worker named William Whittaker, raised her children in the village, and lived out her life within 200 yards of the room with the boarded window. The mill she ran from became the only home she had. In 1847, after the Factory Act had regulated hours and mandated schooling for free child workers, the last indentures at Styal expired, and the apprentice system ended, not in shame, but in arithmetic. Regulated free labour had simply become cheaper than owned labour that had to be fed. The apprentice house emptied. The paperwork stayed. On 28th August 1833, 3 years before Esther ran, the Slavery Abolition Act had received royal assent at Westminster. Under its terms, the enslaved people of the British colonies were freed, and they received nothing. Their owners received £20 million, the largest financial commitment the British state had ever made, distributed claim by claim through a compensation commission that recorded every payment. Among the claims processed in the years that followed was one for a sugar estate called Hillsborough on the island of Dominica. The claim was lodged on behalf of the Gregg family, the enslaved men, women, and children of Hillsborough. More than 100 of them were counted, valued, and converted into a compensation payment, and the money came to the family whose name was over the mill door at Styal. The entry has never been lost. It sits today in the UCL Legacies of British Slavery database, alongside the claims of dukes, bishops, bankers, and half the respectable families of England, and the National Trust now states the connection plainly. The schoolroom, the chapel, the garden village, the doctor, the whole shining apparatus of enlightened Styal stood on a fortune that had sugar in its foundations, and the contradiction ran deeper than inheritance. Every bale of raw cotton that came up the lane from the Liverpool docks had been picked by enslaved hands in the American South. The mill did not merely have slavery behind it, it had slavery in front of it, feeding it every working day of its existence. Hannah Gregg had sat in Liverpool drawing rooms with William Roscoe and prayed for abolition, and her household accounts were kept afloat at both ends by the thing she prayed against. She seems to have known it too. Her letters worry at the question and never resolve it, because it could not be resolved, only inherited. Her son inherited it and fought the century instead. Through the 1830s and 1840s, the 10 Hours movement gathered force, led by men like Richard Ostler, who called the factory children of the North Yorkshire slaves and dared the mill owners to sue him, and Lord Ashley in Parliament, patiently building the case act by act. Robert Hyde. Gregg answered with statistics, with the factory question, with the confidence of a man whose own village proved he believed that masters could be trusted. In 1847, the 10 Hours Act passed anyway. The Greggs lost the argument in the same year they gave up their apprentices, and history has never seriously reopened the case. Then, the raw cotton itself stopped coming. On 12th April 1861, Confederate guns opened fire on Fort Sumter, and the American Civil War closed the cotton ports of the South. Lancashire and Cheshire, whose whole economy spun slave-grown fibre, starved by degrees. By December 1862, close to 500,000 people in the cotton districts were living on relief, and the mills of the North ran short time or stopped altogether. Styal queued with the rest. There was a bit of geometry in it that nobody in the village needed explained. The war that starved them was being fought, at bottom, over the system that had fed them. The cotton their mill had spun for 80 years was slave-grown cotton, and when the argument over slavery finally came to gunfire, the bill arrived in Cheshire as hunger. Relief committees formed, sewing classes were organised to keep idle hands respectable, and the mill workers of the North, to their lasting honour, largely refused to call for the Confederacy that would have refilled their looms. The famine passed. The shine never quite came back. The longer decline was quieter. Steam beat water, coal beat rivers, and the vast new mills of Manchester and Oldham could run thousands of spindles beside a railway line, while Quarry Bank's wheel could only ever drink what the bollin carried. The firm let its empire contract, mill by mill, until Styal was weaving plain, coarse calico on machinery that other owners had scrapped a generation earlier. By the 1930s, the mill was a working fossil, profitable in the way a museum is interesting, and the family knew it. But the failure was the preservation. That is the paradox that makes Styal what it is. Every successful mill in Lancashire was rebuilt, re-equipped, gutted for its next owner, and finally demolished for its land, its records skipped, its apprentice houses long since pulled down or forgotten. Quarry Bank was too unimportant to destroy. The valley that had been chosen for its water kept the railways at a distance. The family that had built it never sold it, and the estate office went on filing its papers into cupboard because that is what estate offices do. Obsolescence did what no preservation society could have done. It held an entire 18th century industrial colony, buildings, village, archive and all, perfectly still, while the world that would eventually want to look at it caught up. In 1939, Alexander Carlton Gregg, the last of the line at Styal, gave it all away. The mill, the apprentice house, the village, and more than 300 acres of the valley went to the National Trust in a single act of gift, one of the first industrial sites the Trust had ever taken. 155 years of family enterprise ended with a signature, which was, after all, how it had begun. A tenant firm kept the looms going through the war, and after it until 1959, when the last cloth came off the beams, and the mill fell silent for the first time since 1784. The silence held for 20 years. What broke it was not machinery, it was the paperwork. But the mill that astonishes the visitors who walk down through the trees today was not built by the man whose name was on the deeds, and it was not saved by the one who signed them away. It was raised floor by floor and thread by thread, hour by unpaid hour, by people who signed themselves with a cross. Their presence at Quarry Bank is documented, recorded in ink on paper, in indentures and memoranda books and a doctor's casebook. Their stories are not. There was a girl called Esther Price. We know she came out of the Liverpool workhouse. We know that her labour for the whole term of her indenture was priced at nothing, board and lodging, and lessons standing in for every wage she never drew. We know she ran on the morning of 8th of August 1836 to find out how old she really was, and that she walked back through the gates on her own 2 feet. We know her hair was cut off, that the window was boarded, that a dead woman lay under the same roof while she sat in the dark, because the superintendent recorded it himself. We know she married William Whittaker and stayed in Styal all her life, within 200 yards of that room. We do not know why she came back. We do not know what she found in Liverpool. We know nothing else that matters. There was a boy called Thomas Priestley. We know he was 13. We know a wheel at Quarry Bank took his finger while he worked, and that the mill sent him to Manchester to be treated and expected him back at his frame. We know he walked 200 miles to London because, in his own sworn words, he wished to see his mother. We know exactly what he told the magistrate on the 14th of August 1806, because the clerk wrote it down and the paper survived. We know he was returned to his indenture like a parcel delivered. After that, nothing. Not where he served out his years, not whether the hand healed straight, not what work a 9-fingered man found afterwards, not where he is buried. The deposition is the whole of him. And there was a boy called Joseph Sefton. We know he was 17 when he ran with Priestley. We know his voice better than his face, because his deposition is the reason historians can set the table at the apprentice house, the boiled pork and potatoes on a Sunday, the peas, beans, turnips and cabbages in their season, the bell at 6, the hour for dinner. We know he answered a magistrate's questions carefully and fairly, praising the food he had run away from. We do not know what he looked like. We do not know whether he ever saw his mother again, or Styal again, or Priestley again. After 14th August 1806, he steps out of the record and never comes back into it. They appear in the records as footnotes, a name on an indenture beside a cross, a line in a doctor's casebook, a punishment entered into a memoranda book between notes on candles and bobbins, and then they vanish into the silence that swallows everyone in a great enterprise who is not a member of the family. 1,000 children pass through the long house on the rise, and for most of them, not even that much survives. An arrival date, a parish, a departure. We know only that they were there, that the mill they served is still standing, and that their names survived, some of them because the Gregg Estate Office kept its accounts, its indentures, and its memoranda, and nobody ever threw the papers away. The mill absorbed them all, the way it absorbed the river. It ran on them, it did not remember them, and it kept the receipts. In 1959, the looms stopped, and for a while the most complete Georgian factory in Britain stood in its valley doing nothing at all, a silent brick ship in a sea of leaves. The National Trust had owned it for 20 years without quite knowing what to do with it, because the Trust's business in those days was mansions, and this was the opposite of a mansion. It was the building the mansions had been trying not to think about. The answer arrived in the 1970s, when a dedicated trust was formed to bring the mill back to life, not as a monument, but as a working thing. In 1978, Quarry Bank opened to the public as a museum of the cotton industry, and the machinery began, piece by piece, to move again. Today, the spinning mules and the looms run daily in front of visitors, worked by demonstrators who must still shout over them, and the calico they weave is sold in the shop by the meter. In the chamber, cut into the rock, the great iron water wheel turns in the Bollins current, as the first wheel did in 1784. A 50-ton veteran salvaged from a Yorkshire mill and installed where the original giants once ran. The noise is the exhibit. School children press their hands over their ears on the spinning floor, and the guides tell them that the workers did 13 hours of this and watch their faces change. Up the rise, the apprentice house has been restored to the decades when the Timperleys ran it. The dormitories have their narrow beds again. 2 children to each. The schoolroom has its slates and its scripture. The garden grows the vegetables the children grew, and the medicine cupboard holds what Dr. Holland held. Costume guides take visitors through it, room by room, and the story they tell at the center of the house is not a composite and not a legend. It is Esther Price, told by name, from the mill's own records in the building where it happened. On 20th of July 2013, Channel 4 broadcast the first episode of The Mill, a television drama built directly from the Quarry Bank archive, with Esther Price as its heroine. Millions watched. 177 years after a superintendent recorded the cutting of a workhouse girl's hair, that girl was a household name, and visitor numbers at Styal climbed as people came to stand in the rooms they had seen on screen. Some of them asked the guides how much of it was true. The guides could do something almost no other historic house in Britain can do. They could go to the archive and show them. In September 2020, the National Trust published its report on the links between its properties and colonialism and historic slavery, and Quarry Bank was on the list, as it had to be. Hillsborough is now part of the official story on the interpretation, and in the guidebook, the sugar estate and the compensation set beside the schoolroom and the chapel where they always belonged. Around 400,000 people a year now come down the lane through a landscape restored by a project costing more than £9 million, and they are told the whole of it, the enlightened village, and the boarded window, the scripture lessons, and the ledger lines, without one being allowed to excuse the other. Behind the public rooms sits the thing that makes all of it possible, and it is not the wheel, it is the archive, the indentures with their crosses, the memoranda books with their punishments, Dr. Holland's case books, Hannah's letters, the wage books, the shop books, the plantation papers, catalogued and conserved and open to researchers, one of the most complete business archives of the Industrial Revolution anywhere in the world. Historians come to Styal the way geologists go to a rock face where every stratum is exposed. Nothing here has to be guessed at. The mill wrote everything down, decade after decade, with no idea that it was writing its own indictment and its own defense in the same set of books, and no way of knowing that the entries it thought least important, the runaway girls, the absconded boys, would be the ones the future came looking for. And that is the strange gift of this place. Britain preserved its most complete factory, and in doing so, it preserved, without ever quite intending to, its most complete record of child labour, because at Quarry Bank, the two are the same building. Everywhere else, the children of the first factories are a statistic. Here they have names, ages, punishments, menus, and sworn testimony. Esther's room has not changed. The mill has changed around it. Visitors sometimes ask the guides whether the apprentice house is haunted. The guides tend to answer carefully because the honest answer is unsettling in a different way. The house does not need a ghost. It has a date, a name, and a superintendent's memoranda in his own hand. The record is the haunting. Stand on the bridge over the Bolin on a November afternoon. Stand on the bridge over the Bolin on a November afternoon when the light goes at 4 and the beech leaves are down and the river is loud with rain, and look at the mill the way 8 generations of visitors have looked at it, and let the picture complicate itself. The serene brick facade is real, but the chimney rising behind it came later, when steam had to help the river, an apology in smoke for the wheel's limits. The great wheel itself is a transplant, carried here from another valley when Quarry Bank's own giants were long gone. The bricks have been repointed, the beds in the apprentice house are reproductions, the garden is replanted, the looms are minded by volunteers who go home at 5. What you are seeing is an act of curated memory, a valley carefully edited for you. But the editing is honest about the one thing that matters. The room upstairs with the window is the room. The papers in the archive are the papers. The names are the names. Quarry Bank is not one building. It is the record, in brick and iron and falling water, of what the modern world cost at the exact moment it was being invented, and of who was handed the bill. Everything about the industrial age that Britain would spend 2 centuries arguing over is here in miniature, the genius and the machine, the philanthropy and the ledger, the sermon upstairs and the 12-hour shift below, held together by a river that never once stopped to consider any of it. Samuel Gregg wanted an empire of thread, and the mill gave him 5 mills, 2,000 workers, a name among the masters of the age. Hannah Gregg wanted the children's souls accounted for, and the mill gave her a schoolroom, a chapel, and a Sunday class, and left the accounting to a database she could never have imagined. Robert Hyde Gregg wanted the argument won, and the mill gave him a pamphlet that history filed as evidence against him. The parish overseers wanted their orphans off the books, and the mill gave them a signature and a cart. Alexander Carlton Gregg wanted an honourable ending, and the mill gave him one, the rarest gift on this channel's list. And Esther Price wanted 10 days that belonged to her, and the mill gave her a dark room. And afterwards, because life is stranger than judgment, a husband, a cottage, and a village for the rest of her days, the mill gave them all what they asked of it, in the careful, expensive, neutral manner of a great house accustomed to absorbing human weather. The mill always gives. That is its genius, and that is its cost. So who does a building belong to? The merchant who paid for it, the uncle whose legacy financed it, the son who defended it in print, the enslaved workers of Hillsborough whose lives were valued, compensated and folded into the family fortune, the parish children, 1,000 of them, who spun its profit for board and lessons, Thomas Priestley, who left a finger in its machinery and his mother's name in a magistrate's file, Joseph Sefton, who left it the menu of its own kitchen, Esther Price, who left it twice and came back twice, or the 400,000 strangers a year who walk down through the trees, buy calico by the meter, and call it beautiful. Quarry Bank does not answer. The mill never answers. It simply stands, with the river turning through it, and lets you decide. Before you leave, go up the rise to the apprentice house, because the guides will show you one more room. It is upstairs, and it is small, and in August 1836, its window was boarded over on the instruction of the people who ran this place, an instruction that survives in the superintendent's own hand. The guides sometimes close the door and let visitors stand in the dark to feel what the record means. 30 seconds. Most of them manage 30 seconds. And the door opens and you step out into the light with your own name, your own hair, and a ticket in your pocket, and the wheel is still turning below in the valley, and the shop is selling cloth, and the car park empties at 5. Esther stayed a week. She is still in there. She always will be. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see a building differently, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which estate, dynasty, or hidden history we should investigate next. There are hundreds of these stories waiting to be told, and every one of them is hiding something beneath the surface.